sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today, we are going to be looking into birthright citizenship in the U.S.
Yeah.
You know, it's been in the news a lot lately, and
Yeah, it's a hot topic.
it is a hot topic. So we thought we'd take a closer look and, try to break down some of the issues for our listeners.
Well, to really understand all the debate that's going on right now, you need to know what birthright citizenship even is.
Yeah.
And just a quick explanation, it's the idea that if you're born on U.S. soil, you're automatically a U.S. citizen.
Makes sense.
It doesn't matter what your parents' status is, whether they're here legally or not.
Right.
If you are born in the U.S., you are a citizen, and that is based on the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment.
But that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
Because the interpretation of that amendment is what's being challenged right now.
That's kind of at the heart of this whole debate.
It is the heart of it.
So let's talk about this executive order that everybody's been buzzing about.
Okay.
What can you tell us about it?
Well, this goes back to January 20th, 2025.
Okay.
Former President Trump issued an executive order, and this executive order was aimed to end birthright citizenship for babies who are born to parents who are in the U.S. illegally.
Okay.
Or even on a temporary basis.
I see.
And so this order was set to go into effect on February 19th, 2025.
Wow. So that would have been just last month.
Just last month.
Did it go through?
Well, thankfully, no.
Okay, good.
It was blocked
Oh, wow.
by a federal judge.
Oh, yeah.
So that must have been a relief to a lot of families.
I bet, yeah.
But it's not the end of the story.
Oh, no, I'm sure it isn't.
The Trump administration is planning to appeal the ruling.
Okay.
So this is far from over.
So this is going to be a long legal battle.
Yeah, it could go on for years.
And while all this is going on, there are families just kind of like in limbo,
Yeah.
wondering what's going to happen. I was reading about this one woman in particular. Her name was Trinidad Garcia, but of course that's not her real name. But, she is pregnant, and she's incredibly anxious about the whole situation.
Yeah, understandable.
I mean, she's worried that if this executive order does eventually go through, her baby could be denied citizenship,
Well,
even though the baby would be born in the U.S.
it's a valid concern.
Yeah, it makes you realize, how real this whole debate is.
And her story's not unique.
Right.
22 Democratic state attorneys general who oppose the order have estimated over 150,000 babies could be denied citizenship every year.
Wow.
If it is implemented.
That's a staggering number.
It is.
150,000 babies, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what was the judge's reasoning for blocking the executive order in the first place?
Well, it can't just be about how many people are affected.
Right.
The judge's decision really goes into the legal details of what's going on here. And she essentially ruled that, Trump's interpretation of the 14th Amendment contradicts over a century of legal precedent.
Legal precedent. Yeah. Now, for those of us who aren't lawyers, can you break down what legal precedent actually means and why it's important in this case?
Okay, so legal precedent essentially means that courts look to past rulings on similar issues to guide their current decisions.
So they're looking back at history.
Exactly. It's about consistency in the legal system.
Okay.
So in this case, the judge is basically saying that for over 100 years, courts have pretty broadly interpreted birthright citizenship to apply to anyone born on U.S. soil.
I see.
With just very few exceptions, like children of diplomats, that sort of thing.
So she's basically saying that Trump's executive order is trying to overturn a very long-standing understanding of the Constitution.
That is exactly what she's saying.
Okay.
And she's emphasizing that you can't just reinterpret the Constitution on a whim.
Makes sense.
It's a complex process
right.
that involves Congress
Okay.
and potentially the courts.
Not just one person making a decision.
Not just an executive order.
Now, this is what I'm thinking. If a president could reinterpret the 14th Amendment with an executive order, couldn't a future president then do the same thing with other amendments?
That's a very good point.
And what's to stop them?
That is one of the biggest concerns of people who oppose the order.
I bet.
They're saying, this could set a very dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
It could weaken the stability of the Constitution.
Right.
And it could open the door for future administrations to reinterpret other amendments.
Yeah.
And then you start, jeopardizing fundamental rights.
Right. And this isn't just a theoretical debate.
Absolutely not.
This is about real people.
Yes.
And real families, like Trinidad Garcia and others who are directly affected.
Very much so. And it raises questions about what does it even mean to be American?
That's a big one.
It is a big one.
And the outcome of this case, I think, is going to have a huge impact on how we define citizenship and belonging in this country.
Absolutely.
So I know there are very strong legal arguments against this executive order.
Yes.
But I also know that there are people who support limiting birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
So what are their arguments?
So a lot of those who support limiting birthright citizenship say that it acts as a magnet for illegal immigration.
A magnet.
Yeah, encouraging people to come to the U.S. just so they can have children who are automatically citizens.
So they're saying it's almost like a loophole.
Yeah, they see it as a loophole.
System.
That puts a strain on resources.
Okay.
I've also heard the term birth tourism.
Birth tourism?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So birth tourism is when pregnant women travel to the U.S. Specifically to give birth so their children can be U.S. citizens.
Wow.
And a lot of these women are from wealthy foreign countries.
Interesting.
It's a controversial practice.
Yeah, I bet.
And it definitely adds another layer to this debate.
Wow, this is getting really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about the legal stuff.
No.
It's about our values.
Right.
You know, as a society.
It really raises questions about what we value as a nation, what kind of society we want. You know, those who support birthright citizenship often say, you know, this is a fundamental principle that's in the Constitution.
Right.
And if we change it, we're kind of betraying our history as a nation of immigrants.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A nation built on immigration.
Well, exactly.
So it's like two different visions of America.
Yeah.
One that's open and welcoming to newcomers.
Right.
And another one that's more focused on, you know,
protecting borders.
Protecting its borders and its culture.
Yeah, maybe being a little more selective about who gets to be a part of the story.
Right. And it's tough.
It is tough.
Because they both have their own valid points.
They do.
So it really does feel like, you know, two different visions of what it means to be American caching.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, for those of us who are like, okay, so what are the chances that this executive order is actually going to succeed?
Right.
What are we looking at?
Well, you know, legal experts are saying it's facing a pretty big uphill battle.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, like we talked about earlier, the courts have pretty consistently upheld a broad interpretation of that 14th Amendment.
Right.
For over a century. So to overturn that precedent would be a huge shift.
Right.
And it would probably require a Supreme Court ruling.
And that doesn't happen overnight.
No, the Supreme Court's pretty careful, especially when they're dealing with constitutional issues like this.
Yeah.
And also, the makeup of the current court doesn't make it seem very likely that they would side with a narrow interpretation.
I see. So this could really drag on for a while.
Yeah.
So are we basically just stuck in this legal limbo?
It's a long road ahead.
And these families, Trinidad Garcia, are just kind of waiting?
The Trump administration seems pretty determined to push this issue.
Oh, wow.
So we can probably expect more appeals, more court battles, and probably a lot more heated debate in the public sphere.
Yeah, I bet.
And it could take years for us to get a resolution.
Especially if it goes to the Supreme Court.
Especially if it goes all the way up.
So let's play this out, hypothetically. Let's say this executive order actually does overcome all the legal challenges.
Yeah.
What happens? Then what kind of impact could this have?
Well, you know, we talked about that 150,000 babies every year.
Yeah.
But what about beyond that?
Yeah, what are the bigger implications?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because if this executive order is successful, it could open the door for other attempts to restrict birthright citizenship.
Really?
Yeah. Some conservative lawmakers have already proposed legislation that would deny citizenship to children born in the U.S. to parents who are undocumented.
Oh, wow. So even if those parents have lived here for years?
Yeah, even if they've been here for a long time and are paying taxes.
Wow, that would be a huge change.
It would be a big change.
What would that even look like?
Well, it could create a whole new class of people who are born in the U.S., but are denied all the rights and protections of citizenship.
Nice.
And then you start thinking about ripple effects, you know?
Wow.
Access to education, healthcare, voting rights, social benefits.
Oh, we're not just talking about babies anymore.
No.
We're talking about reshaping American society.
Yeah, potentially creating divisions and inequalities that last for generations.
Wow.
So it's not just about tweaking immigration policy anymore.
This is big.
This is about our core values.
Yeah.
What it means to belong in America.
It's heavy stuff.
It is.
Like we're really at a turning point.
Yeah, the outcome of this could have consequences for decades to come.
Decades to come. So what can everyday people do?
Well, you know, it feels big and complex.
Yeah.
But there are things you can do.
Okay.
The first thing is just stay informed. Follow the news, read articles from different perspectives, really understand the legal arguments, then share what you learn with your friends, your family, your community.
So educate yourself and then spread the word.
Exactly, because the more people understand what's at stake,
right,
the more likely they are to have these discussions and hold their elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
You can also contact your elected representatives directly.
Okay.
Tell them where you stand on this issue.
So make your voice heard.
Yes. Urge them to protect birthright citizenship and to oppose any attempts to restrict it.
I see.
And you can also support organizations that are fighting for immigrant rights.
Yeah.
Working towards a more just immigration system.
Power in numbers.
Absolutely. The more people speak up,
right,
the more pressure there is on those in power.
To listen and to do something.
To listen and to do something. This isn't just a legal battle.
Right.
This is a fight for the soul of America, and every voice matters.
Every voice matters. I like that. So we've covered a lot here.
Yeah.
History, legal arguments, potential impact, you know, even ways people can get involved. I'm guessing our listeners have learned a lot.
It's a complex issue.
It is. But I feel like there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't really talked about.
Okay.
Public opinion.
Public opinion.
Where do most Americans actually stand on this issue?
That's a good question.
Do they support limiting birthright citizenship, or do they want to keep it the way it is?
Well, researchers have been trying to figure this out.
Okay.
Through public opinion polls.
Okay.
And what they found is there's a pretty big divide.
Really?
Yeah, and it mostly falls along party lines.
I was going to say, I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Probably, yeah.
Republicans tend to be more supportive of limiting it.
Yeah.
And Democrats are generally opposed to any changes.
Exactly.
So it's really just kind of another example of how polarized...
It's a reflection of that polarization.
We are as a country.
Absolutely. Birthright citizenship's just another battleground in the culture wars.
Yeah.
And both sides are very deeply entrenched in their positions.
Yeah, it makes it hard to find common ground.
It does.
When you can't even agree on what it means to be American.
It's hard to have a conversation.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have those conversations. Even if we disagree.
Absolutely.
Open and honest.
We need to move beyond just shouting at each other.
Right.
From opposite sides.
Across the aisle.
We got to try to understand where the other side is coming from.
I mean, if you disagree.
Even if you disagree.
Yeah.
Respectful dialogue.
Yes.
Listening to different viewpoints. Acknowledging the complexity.
Yeah.
Those are really important first steps if we want to find solutions.
That work for everybody.
That work for everybody.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the legal, the social, the political dimensions of this issue.
It's a lot.
And the stakes are high.
They're incredibly high.
Thank you for walking us through all this.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
So for our listeners out there who have been with us on this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about the legal battles, the political debates, the impact on families and society.
Yeah.
But there's another dimension to all of this. The moral dimension.
Yeah.
What does it say about us as a nation?
Uh-huh.
If we deny citizenship to children just because of their parents' immigration status.
Right.
What kind of message does that send to the world?
That's a powerful question.
About who we are and what we stand for.
It really goes to the heart of our values.
It's a tough question.
It is.
But I think it's a conversation worth having.
Absolutely.
And it's a conversation we need to have together.
Together as a nation.
This whole conversation makes you think, what does it even mean to be American?
Yeah, it's a really big question.
It is a big question.
And it's at the center of this debate.
It is. So are we defined by, where you're born? Or is it more about embracing, a set of ideals?
Right. Are we defined by shared bloodlines, or are we defined by a commitment to certain ideals?
Like freedom, equality, opportunity.
Yeah, and that's the tension here.
Right.
This birthright citizenship debate really exposes that tension between these two different visions of American identity. On one hand, you have this idea of America as a nation of immigrants.
Right.
This melting pot.
People coming from all over.
People come from all over, seeking a better life and contributing to our national story.
But then on the other side, you have this view of America as a nation that needs to protect its borders and its culture.
Right, and maybe be more selective about who gets to be a part of that story.
Right, and that leads to, policies that try to exclude people.
Yeah, that focus on the differences between us and them.
Right.
And not really on what we share.
Isn't it ironic, though?
What's that?
A nation that was founded by immigrants now grappling with, how open and welcoming it wants to be to new immigrants.
Yeah, well, this is a recurring theme.
Okay, so?
Throughout American history, each new wave of newcomers has faced that resistance and prejudice.
Right.
There's those fears about economic competition or cultural change.
Makes sense.
But we've seen over time that those newcomers eventually become part of the fabric of American society.
Right, and they enrich it. They contribute to it.
They contribute to its growth and its diversity.
So maybe this birthright citizenship debate is just the latest chapter in this American story.
Yeah.
About, who belongs, who gets to call themselves American.
What does it even mean to be American?
Exactly.
It's a big question.
It is. And the outcome of this whole thing, like we said, is going to have big implications.
Yeah, not just for individuals, but for the soul of America.
This has been so eye-opening.
Yeah, it's a tough issue.
Thank you so much for helping us, break it down.
It's been a pleasure.
For our listeners out there, I want to encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, keep engaging in these conversations.
Yeah, stay informed.
Because, these are important conversations that we need to keep having.
Absolutely.
So until next time, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into birthright citizenship.
Thanks, everyone.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.